So Terry's going to be our moderator today. And if you want to introduce yourself and everybody else can introduce themselves next, take
Well,
over.
welcome. Today we're going to have an amazing episode again on Every Day is Black Mental Health. So welcome everybody. I'm going to be the moderator today. She says she's taking the back seat, but we ain't going to let her. We're going to pull her in. She has too much knowledge, a wealth of knowledge, and we need her as well. So today we want to introduce an episode called The Weight We Carry. And this is something that's directed at black men, talking about the weight that we do carry. So we want to acknowledge that first, that Men's Mental Health Month passed, but Black men's health is deserves a year-round attention. And so, although it was last month, it's this month, it's next month, it's every month, it's every day for us. So we want to give it the attention that it needs, and we want to talk about it today. So we want to kind of frame the conversation with today isn't about fixing black men, right? It's about creating space to hear black men, creating space for black men to be vulnerable and to share those things that we've been carrying. So we want to talk honestly about the what black men carry and where those expectations come from and where the healing can actually start, right? So we want to do a couple community agreements, and that's to listen with curiosity. We want to speak from personal experience. We will. We want to avoid generalizing. We want to respect different journeys because not everybody's journey is the same. And this conversation is educational and it may even sound therapeutic, but it's not therapy. So don't be thinking that. Don't be telling people that we your therapist. Don't get us in trouble. But I want to start off and just introduce with some intros. I'm Terry Terrell. I'm the owner and psychotherapist of Odyssey Counseling and Consulting out of Wichita, Kansas. I have some other great speakers. Would you guys go ahead and share who you are?
All right, I'll go. What's up? My name is Brandon Vasquez. I am a therapist in private practice for We Up Counseling and Consulting, licensed in Washington, D.C., as well as all of Texas.
Yes, and I am Darian Rose, owner of Private Practice Therapeutic Rose, and I am a licensed professional counseling supervisor. Um, Hopefully, coming up, I will be it. So, I'm happy to be here.
Ain't no hopefully we gonna speak for that for you, brother.
Yeah, it's gonna
I
happen.
appreciate
Future Dr. Darian.
it.
Right. All right, Dr. T, you wanna introduce yourself too?
Reintroduce myself. My name is Dr. Tiana Charles. I am the owner and founder of Calliope's Corner. I provide mental health services and education to um, a lot of different people, but in 6 different states: Texas, California, Alabama, South Carolina, Kansas, and Nevada. And so if you are in any of those states, let me know. I can see if I can help.
She gonna help y'all.
Right.
All right, we're gonna start this off with one sentence of what does emotional wellness mean for you today?
Mm. Uh, Emotional wellness. Okay, so well, I would say that for me, emotional wellness is really just the ability to not only understand but also be able to like manage my own emotions in a healthy, constructive way. Not taking out my frustrations on anybody. Being able to bounce back, be able to recover when things don't go exactly as you would like. I mean, like driving through these Houston streets, literally the traffic is horrible. It could easily ruin your day if you let it. But I lean on my using that emotional wellness to help me be able to just like get that frustration out then and there, let it go, and not have to carry that into the rest of my day. So when I say emotional wellness is the ability to be able to do that on a consistent basis.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Mhm.
And I would say for me, it's having the capacity to manage and be self-aware of where where your emotional current state is. Not the past, not the future, but just being current. So just being really self-aware within the present moment and having the self-awareness of what that is, whatever you might be feeling.
Okay, that's good stuff. Can you expand on that a little bit? What is self-aware for some of our viewers?
Self-awareness, I see self-awareness of being aware of self and where you are, what's going on with you. It's almost, it was the saying that I think we probably all heard in uh, our household. You better check yourself before you wreck yourself. So
That's
it's
important.
basically just being aware. You're checking yourself before you wreck yourself, and that can be good or bad, right? So just being aware of your emotions. How does your depression look like? How does sadness look like? How does anxiety look like? How does when you're confused? When the disappointment? Are you really angry or are you disappointed? So being aware of what your emotions is, and us as black men, society and ourselves, we always go, "You angry? You're angry? You upset?" No, you're not angry. You're disappointed.
Yeah,
And that's two different things, and you are allowed to have those different emotions. So learning what those other emotions are, being able to identify them, being able to recognize them, be able to be aware of self and whatever it is, not just bad, also good too. But be aware of what you're feeling within the present moment.
yeah, that's good stuff.
Can I add to that as well with the self awareness? I think, and the self awareness also comes with the ability to know what situations to be in and what situations not to be in. Like, you know what something like, like, hey, if I do this, or if I'm in this type of situation, odds are it's going to bring this type of energy out of me. I don't want that, so I'm going to remove myself from that situation. It means removing yourself from situations. It means removing yourself from people. It means not putting yourself in a situation where you're going to mess yourself up. Yeah, being able to recognize that.
Absolutely, that sounds good. That's good stuff. Emotional wellness for me means being aware of your feelings, label
Mhm.
them accurately, accepting them without harsh judgment, which is something that a lot of us men have a hard time doing it. And then using healthy strategies to respond rather than react, right? And that comes from having a healthy nervous system, being able to respond instead of react, right? So some of those examples might look like naming and regulating emotions. These are things that you guys already said. Healthy expression of some of those emotions, right? Coping, uh, seeking connection, hanging out with your boys, and then just routine self care. Those coping skills on a consistent basis to where that now that's self care, right? Dr. T, we can't leave you out. Oh, she's muted.
Um, Darian actually hit on where I was going to go with it. I was going to say being able to be self aware, but also being intentional in learning how to manage your emotions, right?
Yeah,
That's not something that's taught to us. That's most of the time, right? That's something that we have to navigate and figure out by trial and error what specifically works for us,
yeah,
and what coping skills actually are outside of like I just think about the things that, culturally we're told when we're younger, when we get emotional, right? Even women get told to suck it up, or, but
yeah,
that's not actually teaching us how to manage an emotion when it comes up. And so now that we are older and adults, and even trying to teach our kids how to actually manage emotions, how to actually express them and use your words, to communicate how you're feeling emotionally. And also being able to hold space for other people. So I think that emotional wellness is holistic, and it goes outside of you within yourself too.
yeah. And you touched on a lot of great points, which is a great segue into the next conversation piece that we want to talk about, and that's becoming the strong one, right? So long before we become men and women, like you just said, we're taught that being a man is what it's supposed to look like, right? So both healthy and unhealthy versions we're exposed to, both directly and indirectly, between the images that we're showed and we're exposed to, right? So when we talk about that, when did you realize there were expectations placed on you as a black man?
When did I realize expectations was placed on me? I think it can go from. I think it start off small, like normal. When I mean small and normal, it's like, hey, A's and B's. Something in my family they say, A's and B's bring dollars, C's and D's bring change, make change. So I think that's that's an expectation from a very young age that you take on a mindset, and if you're able to achieve those A's and B's, you feel great about yourself. But the moment you get a C and D, you feel almost embarrassed or almost scared or fearful, disappointment, really embarrassed because you don't want to bring that home, right? So that expectation just grow and grow and grow. And then I think around maybe when you started to develop into your adolescent years, at least for me, it started to change, with expectations of, trying to date or talk to some little girl I like. Now here comes some more of these expectations and responsibilities. And then as you develop more and more, you start engaging in I'm just gonna be real. You start engaging in sexual activities, more responsibilities, more expectations, more things, and then when you get to a certain place, especially when you go to college, okay, well you this type of man, you need to be this, you need to have this, you need to do this, and then once you graduate, especially with the culture of what blackness is, what a black man is, I think it's always been shaped of this is what it is, whether it's music, whether it's television, whether it's entertainment, or whether it's just the ideas that go with certain stereotypes of a college kid or a guy who didn't go to college and who just went straight into the workforce, or maybe no one, a guy who didn't work at all, or a guy who may be having the trouble going in and out of the penitentiary. I think the expectation started at a very young age, and I think I recognized it at a very young age, but it started off in small little things, and then it became very widespread as I got older.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I agree. I would say consciously aware of it probably in my teenage years. I'd probably say maybe like a seventh, eighth grade type of situation when you start noticing the opposite sex in like a serious way. You start realizing that like when you go to the dance, the boys sitting over here, the girls are over here, and then the kind of just the different thought processes and expectations that are placed on men in regards to the pursuit of women. What you got to do in order to woo a woman. That's probably one of like the first time I recognized that there were some expectations on me, just as a man at that point. It wasn't until I got even a little bit older than that I recognized that like there's a different expectation as a black man. Like there's different expectations for being a black man on top of being a man. And to be honest with you, I'm still discovering and unraveling, the different types of expectations that exist for black men, whether that be things I took on myself and I didn't recognize that it was something that wasn't inherently I desired, but it's something that I just learned and picked up through like what I see and what I saw and what I heard.
Yeah, I think for me, I think a lot of the stuff even happens when you're young, like in preschool, right?
Mm-hmm.
You find out there's expectations, and they only intensify, as you become an adolescent and early adulthood, and then you start encountering like different treatment, the stereotypes, and like the messages that come with some of that, right? I think Dr. C was saying something earlier, but just even the women are observing these things that are being consciously put in all of us, right? You hear the messages like "be a man" messages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of that stuff happens as young as 2 or 3 years old, But these kids, we absorb those messages at very young ages, even down to some of the toys and stuff that these kids are trying to play with, that they find out quickly you can't play with the Barbie dolls. This is the expectation that you're supposed to be playing. You're supposed to be over here playing with the boys. Go play with the boys. Those are the type of messages I think are even given to kids as young as 2 and 3 years old, right? Elementary school, you have a lot of the peer policing, And even the teachers kind of reinforce some of that, even in the gender roles. So I think it starts as young as 2 and 3, and it just intensifies just through the cultural space that we're in. How about you, Dr. T? Um, Let me flip the question for you. But when have you first seen maybe your uh, cousins or other the males in your life? When have you start first seeing the expectation for some of them?
So a little about me. I am the only girl, and I'm the youngest girl.
Hmm.
So we're all 6 years apart. So I kind of saw expectations for them pretty early. Um, for example, one of the things that I think of immediately when it comes to that question is the role of protection, right?
Mm,
That comes early for men. You're expected to protect your little sisters, protect your little brother, protect your mom, depending on the situation, right? Um, Make sure that you have all these roles. Like, for example, make sure you hold the door open for a girl when she comes through, or make sure you're the one closer to the street. Things like
I
Mm-hmm.
still
that.
do that. I still do that.
Uh, Even though you're like 10 years old, you're not about to do nothing to nobody. So, but that's an expectation early, is to step into that role of protection for everybody around you. And so that's kind of where I started it. Like me and my brother, I was tied to his hip. Like from young age too. Like you see him, you see me. And so that's kind of where I started seeing it with the men in my life.
man, that's a good point. I mean, protection is something that's taught to a lot of young men. All right, which is again a great segue into our next question, where we start talking about what strength looks like and what are the messages that men received when they were young. So, my question for you fellas is, what messages did you receive about strength?
I would say for me, what I'm thinking about it, I think the strength was like a purely physical,
Okay.
action oriented thing. You know, when you think about strength, it meant like physicality. It meant like getting in somebody's face. It meant beating somebody up, or the ability to
Mm,
project that out. Um,
yeah.
it's not a lot of. I didn't get a lot of information, or I didn't receive, or I didn't notice a lot of information coming my way about how you could protect in other ways, whether that be emotionally, whether that be mentally. That's something I didn't learn and develop until I got much older. But I think on the face of it, the first thing you learn about strength is just like literally your physical ability. Can you run fast? Can you jump high? Can you lift strong things? Can you knock that person out?
Yeah.
Can you not get knocked out if someone hits you?
Mm-hmm.
Not get knocked out.
Yeah. Wait. You know, if you get knocked out, it's quiet for you. If you get knocked out,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Can you
like one
take
of the
that?
worst things that can happen. Yeah,
Hey, he told you better not get beat up because then you got to fight tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
You gotta
You
go
better
back. You gotta
win.
go back home and fight mama.
Yeah, you gotta come out. Yeah,
Yeah,
you better
another little.
win. Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you said because for a lot of young men, often they're taught that strength it means hiding vulnerability,
Mhm.
right? So solving problems alone and toughness, proving toughness, right? Making sure that you don't get knocked out. But healthy strength, we talked about earlier, includes emotional awareness and asking for help and honest connection. And I don't think those things are often taught to a lot of young men. Instead, I think we're often taught the other version of what strength looks like. But what do you think, D Rose?
Um, when you asked that question, it was really making me think. And I'm not the answer of strength. That's how it looked physical. I was like physical, but I'm sitting there thinking I really didn't have the conversation of strength on what it was supposed to be growing up. So when you ask, my mind automatically jumped to one word, and it was just obedience.
Mm,
By me being obedient to whatever adult or authority figure was in the room, that's how kind of strength was kind of shown to me. you have to be obedient to whoever the adult is, whoever the authority figure is. You know, you get left with the younger cousin, nothing but like 2 or 3, 4 years older than you. Like, listen to what they gotta say. And by listening to them, that's what's kind of strict. So it was always in my mind obedience and almost like whoever's maybe the oldest in the room, but conversation about having actual like strength and what that meant wasn't really had, or it was in a form of spiritual, like, okay, hey, we gotta go to church, or it was in a form of maybe the Bible or spiritual, like this is what strength is. But it wasn't so much for me the physicality of, like, it was more so obey.
Obey. So
I
the
don't
high.
know if that was strength. So I think I picked it up along the way of, I would say, the ignorance of not having, or the absence of not having a conversation about strength. I found strength in different ways, and maybe that's why I'm a therapist, or led me to being a therapist. I found strength in different ways, and I noticed what was happening to the brothers who was taught the physical part, right, the physicality part of what strength is, and I seen what that was doing. That didn't look so strong to me for some sudden, but yeah, my mom taught me to obedience and authority figures.
Okay. No, that's good stuff. And you made an interesting point though. You know that you had to figure out what strength was, but you were observing the absence of what you perceived to be real strength in the actions of those who were mimicking things that were shown before them, and
Yeah.
that they were told to do, right? So, Dr. T, the men in your life
Mm-hmm.
at a young age, what did you observe, from the female perspective regarding strength?
I would say that I observed more of what strength wasn't, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So when it came to the idea of strength, it was more of so you you have to be strong but not showing emotions. You can't cry. Like, what are you crying for? Um, that type of energy. Obviously, at some point, I'm like, that's not okay. But it was a lot of that of um, you're not supposed to feel any type of way. You're supposed to just do it and get it done. Or you need to be Bob the Builder. Like, you need to know how to fix everything and everything for everyone. um, which, that's not realistic either.
Uh,
So that's kind of what growing up strength looked like, was the men needed to know everything related to, I mean, to be honest, the patriarchal idea of what a man is,
yeah.
right? So how to finance things even from a young age, like, you needed to have a job by about 14.
Mm-hmm. As soon as you can work legally.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
You had to go get the money. My first
Yeah.
job, I think, was about 13, 14.
Or
Mm-hmm.
you need to find something to do, whether that's activities, basketball, football. You need to find something productive, and that means being busy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I heard you say something that I feel like is relevant again about the message of strength, and that's masking feelings with anger or silence, right? So when our emotions are discouraged, anger or withdrawal becomes default ways to show distress. And so what we were seeing a lot, at least when I was young, was that anger was one of the most accepted ways of acceptable emotions from a man, right? And so leads us kind of to our next question is what emotions were acceptable growing up?
You on mute, Marion?
Rose, you on mute, brother.
What emotions was acceptable growing
What
up?
emotions were acceptable growing up for you?
never thought about that question. But I think about what wasn't acceptable, which we kind of said, but what was. I can't answer that. That's a good question. I'm gonna have to think
Let's tie both of them together because you made a good point. What emotions were discouraged and what emotions were acceptable?
Well, for me, discouraged for me was, I ain't gonna lie to you. I used to be a crybaby. I was a crybaby. But I go out there, I play football, play basketball, but I was the one that never got picked. I was the one that if we playing sideline football, where you catch the ball, catch on the sideline, they gonna hit you real hard. I was the one that was crying, so I knew I wasn't gonna play football. But they was always, tell me, stand up, stop crying, or they never wanted to play with me, right? So I know that was discouraged. But what was encouraged, eventually, what was encouraged for me was always being myself. Always to hey, be yourself regardless of whatever is happening. Being individual, so a certain uniqueness of just being yourself. Hey, be yourself. It always came back to just be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. So I don't know what emotion that is, but I can tell you, not crying. I did hear the not crying, man up, or when you're really frustrated, disappointed, or you just got a whooping, stop crying. Hey, that hurt. Let me get this out a little bit. But as far as what's being encouraged, I think just more so just my own uniqueness and me standing out. It just always came back to, hey, just be yourself.
Okay.
So that's interesting because I'm thinking about my personal experience. My mom, my parents, especially, were very like, you be yourself. You know, what I'm saying, don't be afraid to be yourself. But it was also accept when it goes counter to what we tell you to do.
Yes.
So like for what was discouraged, like, yeah, I could be smart, but I can't be too smart. You know what I mean? I can't call out too many inconsistencies that I'm noticing. The whole like do as I say, not as I do type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of so we could be angry. You could be angry, but you can't show it, and it can't be about anything that has anything to do about what they told you to do, or some kind of responsibility they putting on you, or a task they're giving to you. Any kind of resistance, really, when it comes to those type of things, it's just like Darren said, like obedience is kind of expected, and I guess kind of rewarded when it comes to how I experienced growing up, and to a point. So I got to the point where I was too big to really be pushing around literally, but what was kind of celebrated and what they wanted me to be able to do is be able to think for myself, which now I think about it is like, you want me to think for myself, but I can't really use the information that comes from me thinking for myself. But yeah, that's a really interesting question that I haven't really thought too much about. So that's all I got for you right now. I gotta do a little more thinking.
That's good. You guys have added some good stuff. I appreciate it. And I know it is a tough question. I mean, when I had to think about it myself, one of the things I could automatically think about, one of the emotions that was most acceptable growing up was anger. I mean, although we know now that anger is a secondary emotion, and that's not exactly what you feel at first. Anger is one of the most accepted emotions that I saw in men. It was acceptable for you to be angry. It's acceptable for you to be irritated or annoyed. Those were acceptable emotions in the men that I saw. Right. Even the consequences of being angry. What wasn't acceptable was crying. Right. Crying, showing fear, or showing signs of, because they were all considered signs of weakness. But as I got a little bit older, then I realized that also taught me emotional suppression. So if I'm not able to show how I really feel about that, I was scared, or whether I was actually wanted to cry or whatever, if I'm not allowed to show that, then it forces me to have to push that stuff down and put this mask on. And I think a lot of men have been really good at walking around with the mask. They become their boys suppressing, become the men that are suppressing, and then they in the relationships, they wonder why we're not able to share those emotions or let out because we've never had the space or been able to be vulnerable enough to show those type of emotions. So
So
yeah,
I'm curious, at what point did you learn that it wasn't okay, or that those emotions in the way that you were showing them was not an acceptable way, or that it was a secondary emotion?
I think for me, once I got educated, once I got into some higher learning, I'm not even going to say high school. I said maybe even almost college.
College.
Um, I mean,
College.
I learned obviously not to put my hands on people at certain points in time because there were consequences that would restrict my freedom. However, I think once you get into higher learning, then you understand what was happening and why that was okay within the cultural context it was happening there.
Hmm. I have to agree with that sentiment. It was college for me too. Going to Prairie A&M University, individuality and being in a place where your mind, where everything was questioned, question everything. So
Yeah.
that gave me the that started opening me to like starting to think about things a lot different. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
say college too, just being there, just and really watching the women on campus, the black women on campus at HBCU at Prairie A&M University, how individual they were, and they was always so inspiring. Some of them names and faces are popping up in my head, but just the individuality of them, and that goes back to me saying like they were just being themselves. So as I started to harvest on that, I can see how anger, that wasn't acceptable. That wasn't acceptable, like my family, because I come from a big family. And we was kind of even when it comes to males and females. So anger not gonna be tolerated by the males. They're not gonna do that. But other things was taught and was given, but anger wasn't. So, but I think that started to be more exposed and I became more aware of that as I went to college. I definitely higher learning from a different prairie.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I would say that for sure, like the college and also, I would just say adulthood. Let's say adulthood,
Yeah, those
because you start interacting with people in a different way. That's not
mm-hmm.
like everybody's adults now. The responsibilities is there. The consequences is for sure there, and recognizing that like, oh, I'm not getting the type of results that I feel like or I thought I should be getting based on how I'm moving, how I'm feeling within different relationships. Is like it's at odds with what I feel with what I've learned or thought I've learned about how things should go, and I'm like, why am I not happy? Why do I feel frustrated? Why do I feel like like I don't feel good about the situation, and kind of force a little bit of self awareness and like having to examine those thoughts and those feelings and be like, why can't I be frustrated? Why can't I communicate these things? Are they because they're not gonna like me no more? Then do I want them as my friends, or do I want these people in my life? If I gotta be this half a person. And the older I get, the more comfortable I became with like recognizing that that is true.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, that's good. So you said the adulthood. I said college.
Say it like,
I think
no,
I think it's important to make the distinction because we see adults that are not
yeah, that's very true.
that are still not educated enough. I think, like what you said, D Rose, when you're in an environment where you everything is questioned and and you get to ask those questions, and you're also challenged to 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 explain the behavior that you deem acceptable, and you have to come to new ideas and new ideology about why it is that I operate the way I do.
Mm-hmm.
Great question, Dr. T. I think the next one talks a little bit about vulnerability. When was the first time that you guys were able to recognize that there was a space for you to be vulnerable in?
I'm gonna say my friendships.
Mm.
Um, when you come from a household where it echoes sentiments or statements like man up, stop crying, um, you do exactly that because that is being taught. That's not acceptable here. You can't do that here. I love my dad. I love my dad. We have a great relationship. I do remember he was so surprised. He was so surprised when I was like, "Why y'all go talk to your mom? Come talk to me." Well, you told me to stop crying. You told me, you don't want to hear that, so don't talk to my mama. But I would definitely say my friends when we started, we used to sit and talk, and I noticed some of the conversations we was having wasn't normal, and it was kind of a little bit of high school, but especially when we went off to college. Again, going back to Prairie at university, and just having conversations that was just things that you been wanting to say, think you've been experiencing your whole life, but then you notice that you're not the only one. So now you're sitting there trading not only what you're kind of going through and a release of what you've been through, but you're sharing a common thing. It's like, hey, you've been through like that, I've been through like this. So I'm gonna say college for me, and then watching, going to certain events, seeing certain people come to the campus. So that also goes back to college for me. I don't want to be too long-winded, but it goes back to college for me and my friends. And as we have gotten older, the conversations we have now as men, it can probably be a podcast in itself, because we really do challenge each other and be vulnerable and accepting to whatever that person is going through. And we lay out every option, everything. But first, we make sure we acknowledge that we hear them. And whatever we give back to them, they can take it or leave it, but we still gonna be here. But I want to say my group of friends that I have selected, but I think it got better as I went to college, and I noticed how it kind of manifests in other friendship groups too, whether they went to college or not, how it kind of expands. But I'm gonna definitely say my friends that I pick, because I'm able to speak to them whether they went to college with me or not. I'm able to speak to them, so I'm.
That's good.
I agree. I would say like my core group of friends. I got a solid bunch. That's where it started. That's where I first like learned like, oh, this is how it could be. It's still a group of guys at the end of the day. So there's some things that like it takes some getting used to, or get some warming up to bring that vulnerability out and be able to discuss it. And even now I still think there are some things that are people we are still a little hesitant to bring up, but we can and will bring it up. But I will say it started with the friendship group, and then it got locked in in dating, when I found like my like serious dating, when I found my wife. Well, before she was my wife, well, when that was when they come to you and like ask you specific questions, and you be like, oh shit, I don't have an answer for this. But I gotta have an answer for this. And then that was like the last straw right there. I was like, okay, this feels great. And that was just my wife, so she did good work.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff, fellas. I think one of the reasons I feel like I'm gonna throw this out there because this is one of the reasons why I feel men struggle with vulnerabilities. One of them being culture, upbringing, and just kind of some of the consequences that are taught because many men showing weakness, they risk rejection, right? They risk sometimes loss of status or actually real harm depending on the situations in which you're kind of showing that. So hiding feelings becomes a survival strategy and not just a personal failing, right? So it was interesting that you guys talked about friendships because sometimes friendships actually keep the stigma going of some of the traditional things that keep men from not wanting to be vulnerable. So
I agree with that. I
yeah,
agree. I agree with that. And I'm sorry to those guys who saying found the wrong friend group and stuff like that. But like I know that to be true. But I guess I've gotten pretty lucky, and I've been able to cultivate a really good friend group, and that's why they've been being part of the squad for 2 decades plus.
yeah. So get some real friends, fellas.
Real friends. How many of us have them?
Well, that's real spill though, right? So there's consequences and the stigmas that keep showing themselves in some of the groups. Like we're all talking about the friends group, and I think one of you said this. As you continue to evolve, your friend groups and the expectations change, and in some of those groups you're able to be vulnerable versus some of the ones that maybe you first started with were not always there, and maybe some of those first ones some of the ones that reinforce some of the stigmas in those groups. So
And I'm curious because Brandon mentioned that the first woman, well, he didn't say that. He said a
Right.
woman that he
get
was
me in
able to
trouble.
be vulnerable,
Yeah, like, yeah, like, did not
that he
say
was able to be vulnerable with.
yes, yes.
What
Yeah,
did he like?
put the
So
captions on.
I'm curious. The question I was going to ask is, who was the first woman that you were able to be vulnerable with, and what made that be a, you know, what, how can I, as a woman, be a bridge to the black men in my life to
Mm,
be vulnerable, right? That's ultimately where I'm trying to get with this question. Uh,
okay.
so what was that safety net that y'all felt with that person?
She's the
Hmm.
first woman.
I'm gonna say my
And you ain't
mom.
got to call out no names.
I really want to be petty. I want to say there's no woman. There's none at all. But I'll be being petty if I said that. If I was being honest, it would probably be my mom, like I just said. My dad used to be like, "Why you always go to your mom and talk to her?" Well, she's not the one saying, hush up, stop crying, man up. So I'm gonna say my mom. Um, but between my mom and the first actual woman, it was some time, and I'm gonna say probably when I felt comfortable to start talking, start communicating what was going on with me. I don't know who, but I'm a guess around that time around college too as well. Again, going to an environment where everything was questioned, everything was talked about, where your ideology was like, hey, that's where you came from, but is that you? Yeah, that's your church, but is that really your church? Or that's the church that your parents just took you to? Are you really Christian, or is this just a religion that you say that you are because your parents say that's what you are? What's for you? So I'm gonna bring that back to Prairie View. Now I can't identify what woman, but I'm sure at some point in time it was a question. It was provoked. It was a safe space where being on that campus where that was allowed to fester. So I'm gonna say college for me.
Yeah, I can't call exactly uh which like when it happened or but I can't say that like it involved a lot of trust. It involved a lot of curiosity. Maybe I should say it involved a lot of curiosity first, and then
Yeah, curiosity.
the
Yes.
curiosity, and also they had the trust. But definitely the curiosity. It didn't feel like it was any kind of like I'm just putting this using this information. I'm locking it in the vault, and I'm gonna bring it out when I need ammunition. It felt like they were really just trying to get to know me and use that as information to like better tailor their ability to be my friend. Um, and they actually cared about what that answer was, and they moved with whatever that answer was. If that makes sense, and not trying to counter me. Like yeah, I was like yeah, but this is now I'm going to evaluate your whole feeling, all your feelings.
Mm.
There wasn't that.
Man, that's a tough question. I feel pressured to say my mom, but I'm gonna be honest. I don't think it was my mom. I think it was my grandma.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably my grandma. Um, and you put the pressure on me. But I think for most men, I think that's a great question, right?
It is.
What does the safe spaces look like? Who are the women in their lives that create the safe space and allow them to be vulnerable enough to show who they really are and not who have been told to be? So, great question, man. We did not get as far as I thought we were gonna get. So,
I wrote my quick.
And you got some wonderful questions too. So now
Yeah,
I'm about to go really sit and really sit with
I
it.
might take it back to my clients. I'm like, hold up.
we got
Who was the first woman that made you feel safe? And I was like, it's gonna be my first next question.
I think
Girl, I'm about to hop right in my cousin chat.
we should do a part two. But
Okay.
also, the reason why I asked that is because the way that y'all struggled is important for us to know too. Because are we actually providing that safe space to where you can immediately like, oh, my homegirl such and such. That's hands down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like as women, we need to know that you probably aren't as safe as you think you are. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I kind of asked that too, was like,
I'm
Yeah,
I'm
there's
sorry.
levels.
That I mean, that opens up a lot of great follow-up questions, though.
You do.
Because I mean, depending on who the woman is in their life, the woman might actually reinforce some of the stigmas that they're trying to get away from around the men.
That's what I was thinking. The position of the woman too. I think it matters whether she's your mom. If that woman is the mom, a sister, your lover, a cousin, a friend, or an associate. I think the role of her too allows you to be a little bit more vulnerable or less vulnerable depending on the role that she comes in, like depending on the role of that woman. So that's what I'm thinking.
That part.
mm,
Actually, I don't think there was really any woman who like I had full vulnerability. I might have women friends who like I can be this type of vulnerable with this person, or I can show this part of myself to this person. But I don't know if it was anybody who was like, yeah, I can just be 100% just raw with this one person until
Which is sad.
Right. And then, and
I
then we
know,
also have to acknowledge
but
that
it is. I know.
there's some men in some occupations that they still aren't allowed to really be vulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're
Facts.
working in a prison, or if you're working,
Yeah.
as a police officer, or some of the positions that we really do look towards, um, that does represent a lot of the stoicism that we're trying to get away from and be more honest and vulnerable as men. Some of those positions really do reinforce a lot of the stigmas that we're trying to get away from.
mhm.
So,
Hmm.
man, I want to ask so many other questions, man, but man, we're gonna definitely have to do a part two. Um,
Definitely.
Yeah, and I would like to recommend that like one of the things we talk about in the part two, or maybe even the part three, if it goes that long, is just like how I hear a lot of people talk about the patriarchy, especially when we talk about the patriarchy and how you reinforce it, but like we never really talk about how like men also suffer from patriarchy.
yeah,
Like patriarchy, we don't like we get hit by the patriarchy too. Like we suffer under it,
No,
maybe not in the same way as women do, but we for absolutely
we
for
might have
sure
well we
self
get
like
hurt.
suffer under the
yeah,
I
patriarchy. Yeah.
agree. And that's why I brought it up in one of my answers, was because it actually causes more pressure and like this false idea of what strength and integrity is, right? Um, and so I think that would be a great topic to dive into, because I don't think I've actually never really heard anybody dive into it. What is it? What does it actually look like? How does it
Mhm.
kind of invade our culture?
Not only how we suffer under it, and also how a lot of times women
Oh,
reinforce it.
absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
100%,
yeah.
100%.
Close us out, Dr. T.
All right, so y'all heard it from the men. There is a lot of stuff that we still have to talk about, so we may have to run this back for August. And so, thank y'all so much for being here. Join us next month for Every Day is Black Mental Health Day, because every day you are worth being healthy mentally. All right, have a good night, y'all.
Lessons.
It'd be easy.